what I do is I'd first go look up somebody on LinkedIn. And then what I'd do is I'd find all these different features that stuck out on their face. And every single one of these features teaches me something about the person.
Today, our guest is BRIAN GALKE, the Decoding Detective, an expert in communication and a dynamic speaker. BRIAN used his positions in retail, service, and help desks to master interpersonal skills. Eventually, he discovered that there's a game-changing technique he's come up with of decoding facial features. Now, a sought-after speaker, he's shared stages with some of the big names, top industry figures such as Steve Sims, Greg Reed, and Alex Hormozi. Welcome to the show, BRIAN.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to be with you today. We're going to have a lot of fun. Now, prior to hitting the record button, we were chatting a little bit as we were getting set up for the show today. And you kind of indicated that there's a fairly recent challenge that's kind of come your way in
Sure.
the not too distant past that you've had to contend with. And so walk us through what's been going on and how you're making your way through it.
During the pandemic, my ex-wife and I separated. And it was just, there wasn't anything that was wrong. It just wasn't right. And so at a time when we couldn't do a lot of things, we lived in different households and we had a small child. And that took, because the court system and everything got backed up, we separated in 2020 and it took till 2022 for us to actually get divorced, which is just crazy. And so I got divorced and took on a lot of the debt and things like that to help pay off. And then I got fired from a job of 21 and a half years about 6 months later.
Wow.
So you talk about two dramatic lifestyle changes in a short period of time. That was my 2022. And it was some of the best things and some of the worst things at the exact same time.
Plus, on top of that, still dealing with, pandemic related after effects in the mix. And
Yes.
so, yeah, a number of things. So it's interesting. Obviously, the delay in kind of closing out things with the divorce, a lot of that would have been a lack of being able to go to being able to get in front of a judge or the legal system ramifications. So,
Correct.
So having that kind of extend or expand a little bit beyond maybe what it could have been, how did you find that was impactful for you and you guys as you were trying to make your way through that transition?
Sure. Because it was taking so long, you just sit in limbo. And the problem, like anything else, is when you have too much time, you focus on what can be the negative things. So rather than, okay, it's done, it's time for us to move on, there was a lot of, when do we go to court? How do we settle things? So there was bickering before there was paper. Now, the good news is we make way better co-parents than we did being married. Nothing against her, nothing against me. It just wasn't meant to be long-term. But when you live in that time where you're kind of in the void of, well, you're not single, but you're not married, what do you do? And it just seemed to drag on forever and ever. And it was a lot of, in Texas, you go to a mediator first and then if you can't agree, then you have to go to court. But the mediators were so backed up, I think we had to wait 6 months to have the conversation. And it was all done over Zoom. But the good news is when it's done, it's done. Now, is every day perfect? No. There's still a lot of days that, we should remember why we're not married. But, we're also at a place where we did this past summer, we did a trip to Italy. And it was to show our daughter that we may be divorced, but she's not the reason. And just because you're not married doesn't mean you have to hate each other.
That's phenomenal. I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, and I think that potential exists in a lot of relationships, and to hear that that's the approach that you guys have taken is absolutely it warms my heart to even know that that's the case, and also just congratulations for getting a chance to go to Italy.
Oh yeah, I love Italy. I love to travel. That's one thing that we did really well when we were dating and everything is we would go. I used to work corporate America. I used to sell technology to jails and prisons, and they all shut down staff-wise from Christmas to New Year's. So all the traveling I did during the year would use my points and miles, and we'd always go to Europe for Christmas. So we've done Germany, I want to think, Hungary, Vienna, Prague, all kinds of places. So got to travel quite a bit. I think I'm at 28 countries, and she was like closer to 50 because she used to travel for corporate America a lot.
Wow, amazing. So after the smoke kind of cleared, and you had, I guess, some finality to that part, like the official aspect of relationship. Things were pursuing along every day. Everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden, you walk into work one day and you get the notice. Like, how did that transpire? Where your 21-year endeavor with one company basically ended?
Yeah. Social media. So, the company never tells you the reason that you're let go, but what happened is If you're familiar with traffic and conversion, I went with Steve Sims. So Steve Sims had a VIP ticket. I went along with him. He was my speaking coach at the time. So while I was working in corporate America, I knew I wasn't happy. And so I sold my soul for X amount of dollars, and I was miserable for 8 hours a day.
Mm.
So the way that I made myself happy was I would take vacation time and go attend events. And I knew I wanted to be a speaker. So there was never a conflict. I would take vacation days and I'd go speak for free. Maybe they pay my travel, something like that, or I would go and attend events, and that's how I'd recharge my battery. Well, at Traffic and Conversion, there was a guy named Ryan Magin, and he was doing like street style interviews, and we happened to meet the day before Traffic and Conversion, and he ran back into me. He's like, "We got to create some videos with what you do." And I'm like, "Okay." So we did a few videos, and I remember, I can tell you when I knew I was going to get fired, and it was November 2022. And I'm visiting my brother in Washington. We're there with my ex-wife and kid. And so like we still travel even though we were getting divorced. And I log into TikTok and he convinced me to create a TikTok account. I'm like, okay. But I never had anything as Brian Galke. Everything was subtle skills. All of a sudden it started saying all these people I knew saw my video. And what had happened is they made a change to the algorithm that if you had my phone number in your phone, they were showing you my videos. So I went from being subtle skills, never had my name anywhere, to all of a sudden, all these customers I work with, coworkers, everything are seeing the videos. And I was like, I know this won't end well. Then a week later, I was fired. And the paperwork said like repetitive poor performance. And that's after 21 and a half years, never having a single HR write-up, just getting rewarded on the company-wide call for winning another state contract and things in September. So it threw me for a huge loop because I knew I wasn't happy, but I was afraid to leave because I was making good money. But when that decision was made for me, I took the month of December off because I thought I've been working for almost 22 years for one company. I'm going to take a month off for me. And during that month, I pondered, what do I do? Do I go back to corporate America? Do I not? And I'd always wanted to be a speaker. And so I said, even if I have to live off my 401k for a year, I'm going to try it and see if this is really, truly what I want to do for a living or not. And 2023 was really rough because all I was doing was depleting my 401k. I was paying my own travel to speak, or maybe they paid my travel, but I had to pay, hotel, things of that nature, and meals and things. I had obviously child support now because I'm divorced. I have my own rent. I have bills. So my bills are going up and there's zero money coming in. And it was really challenging. There were a lot of days that I wanted to walk away and go, I can just go back to corporate America. But again, half my life I worked for a single company and I got zero going out the door. Nothing. So why not invest in myself? And a lot of people are scared to take from their 401k. Is it the best advice? No. But you know what? Who's to say how long you're going to live? So why not use the money to live? Because you can always make more money in the long run.
Well, and more importantly, you have the opportunity to double down on yourself. And, from my vantage point, I firmly believe that you are your best asset. And you can go buy assets, but you can't go buy yourself. But you can invest
Agreed.
in yourself. And there's a difference. And that's the route that you decided to take.
Yeah. Scary. Very, very scary. Wanted to quit a lot of times. And the universe is kind of funny because every time I thought about leaving, another gig would come in. And it wasn't enough to cover all my bills, but it was enough to keep me going. So I didn't have to take as much of my 401k that month. And so every time I really truly think about quitting, another gig comes in. And so it's like life giving you little tips, go, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, that's incredible. And now with all this change, this focus, and now you've been basically full time at doing this now for a while.
Yes.
How have you find the progression starting to take? I mean, obviously, over 21 years, you built a lot of relationships. You got to know a lot of people. So I'm sure that is a big part of what's maybe helped you do this. And you mentioned traffic and conversions, great event to go to. I was at the one in 2024 actually in Vegas, and so I'm really curious. How have you seen the progression take place, and just getting through that first really hard year, and doubling down and being able to kind of like, I can keep going and keep going, and just like almost buying yourself a few more months of energy as you were getting these speaking events coming through.
Sure.
And when did you start to see the tipping point where you said, you know what, I can double down on this?
Yeah. It wasn't for year one for sure. Year one, I made less. I made in year one what I made 21 and a half years ago. So that was the really, really defeating part. Ironically, to the question you asked, in the 21 years I was working, because I chose to get out of that industry, my contacts weren't worth anything.
Mm.
However, my contacts from what I was doing to feed my soul of going to different events and things, that's actually what kept me going. So it was nobody in my 9 to 5 world that really supported me. In 2019, when I was married, my ex had 90 days where we had to move to Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, they wanted her to move back and forth, but we decided to move the family there. And they said, hey, if this goes really well, would you be willing to do this over and over? We thought, well, we can go on the nomadic life, but I couldn't do that with my corporate job. Now, Arizona and Texas are close enough that I could do that and still be there. But if they asked us to go East Coast or West Coast, I wouldn't be able to. So I reached out to my mentor and I said, hey, would you care if I taught this skill? He's like, no, not at all. And that's when I started going to events and kind of introducing myself. And when you say face reading, people are like, ooh, can you read palms too? And I'm like, no, but it was meeting all these people. And it's funny, I knew what I wanted to do, but like everyone else, I had imposter syndrome. But when you're around successful people who believe in you, you believe in yourself more. Brad Lee was one of the first ones that I joined his mastermind, in 2017, I think, because we're coming up on, 2020. So around the pandemic time, I joined his mastermind and he befriended us. And then he brought on Janine Driver, and Janine Driver and I became friends because of Brad. And so I started meeting all these people. And then I met a guy named Joe Ingram, and Joe had Steve Sims on his podcast. And I said something to Steve about he needed to trim his upper mustache because when we hide our upper lip, it's like keeping people at bay. And he's like, I don't care. But I followed up with Steve. And then he's like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? But yeah. And then after the podcast, he goes, you want to come speak at my event? I was like, yeah. And so it wasn't anything that I strategically thought, I'm going to talk to this person. But going to events, investing, like you said, investing in yourself isn't to go necessarily see who the speakers are, because you can find a lot of speakers on YouTube. But it's to go listen to the speakers and meet the people in the audience.